The sound of metal scraping against concrete still echoes in my head. One second, my daughter Lila was rolling down the small ramp in front of our house, smiling, ready for school. The next, a sharp voice cut through the air. Try walking like normal people. And before I could even blink, Karen's foot slammed into the ramp. The aluminum frame toppled. The wheelchair jerked. My little girl hit the ground with a crash that made the whole street freeze. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was her crying and my heart breaking. If that was your child, your daughter, what would you have done? Would you scream? Would you beg for humanity? Or would you stand in silence, holding your child, while the world just watched? She thought she was teaching us a lesson. What she didn't know was that she had just awakened the wrong father, the kind who doesn't fight with fists, but with justice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to tell me something. What would you have done if someone mocked your disabled child like this? Comment below. Let me know which city you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, subscribe and stay with me till the end. We moved into Maple Grove just 6 months before that day. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet, peaceful neighborhood where my daughter, Lila, could finally live without being treated differently. She was born with a spinal condition that made walking impossible, but if you met her, you'd never notice her limits. She painted, laughed, cracked jokes about her cool racing chair, and had a light that could soften even the hardest hearts. At least, that's what I thought until I met Karen. From day one, she watched us like we didn't belong. Every morning when I adjusted Lila's wheelchair ramp, I'd feel her gaze from across the street, arms crossed, lips tight, judgment in her eyes. The first time she spoke to me, it wasn't to say hello. It was to complain that the ramp ruined the look of the neighborhood. I tried to be polite, to explain that my daughter needed it, that it was temporary until her new motorized chair arrived. But she didn't care. She just scoffed and muttered, "Some people think rules don't apply to them." The HOA letter started soon after, warnings about unsightly modifications, requests for aesthetic compliance, threats of fines. Every time I saw one of those envelopes in our mailbox, Lila's smile faded a little more. She started asking questions no father wants to answer. "Dad, am I making people mad just because of my wheelchair?" I'd always tell her, "You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart. The world just needs time to catch up to your strength." But inside it hurt, because I could see what they were doing, slowly pushing her into feeling like an outsider in her own home. One afternoon, as we were watering the flowers, Karen walked by with her little dog. She looked at Lila's ramp and shook her head. "If you people cared about this community, you'd keep things looking decent." Lila froze. I could see tears welling up in her eyes. That's when I realized this wasn't about HOA rules or appearances. This was about cruelty, and in that moment, I promised myself one thing. I'd protect my daughter's dignity no matter what it cost. Because kindness shouldn't depend on convenience. If you were in my place, watching your child's light dim because of someone's hate, what would you have done? Tell me below and keep watching. Because what happened next changed everything. Days turned into weeks, and the hostility didn't fade, it grew. The HOA letters came like clockwork, each one colder than the last. Failure to comply. Violation of community standards. Remove unauthorized structure. Every envelope felt like a small stab to our peace. But Karen, she wasn't satisfied with paper. She wanted control. Every time I wheeled Lila outside for some fresh air, Karen would appear, pretending to water her lawn, but always watching us. One morning, she waved her phone at me and said, "I'm documenting all of this for the HOA records. That ramp's an eyesore. You people think sympathy gets you special treatment." I bit my tongue. I didn't want to argue in front of Lila. But when I glanced at my daughter, I saw her looking down, ashamed, as if she'd done something wrong just for existing. That's when my patience started to burn away. Soon, Karen began whispering to neighbors. I'd hear fragments of conversations when I passed by. "They're bringing down property values. It's not fair to the rest of us. That ramp doesn't meet regulations." The same people who once waved now avoided eye contact. Overnight, we went from the nice new family to the problem. Then came the fake citations, letters claiming we were late on HOA, dues we'd already paid. The president of the board, a friend of Karen's, couldn't find our receipts. Coincidence? I didn't think so. One evening, while Lila and I were fixing a loose bolt on the ramp, Karen walked up again. She looked at the wheelchair, then at me with that smug little grin. If you just taught her to try harder, maybe she wouldn't need this thing. For a second, I froze. My hands trembled on the wrench. Every fatherly instinct in me wanted to shout, to defend, to protect. But I saw Lila's eyes widen in fear, and I swallowed the rage. Instead, I said quietly, "Karen, please, just go home." She smirked. "You don't belong here." That night, Lila refused to come out of her room. When I knocked, she whispered through the door, "Dad, I wish I could just walk. Maybe then she'd stop hating me." Those words broke something inside me. I sat on the hallway floor, staring at her closed door, realizing how deep Karen's cruelty had cut. This wasn't about rules anymore, it was about dignity. I started keeping records, photos, videos, every HOA letter, every time she showed up yelling about the ramp. I didn't know yet what I'd do with them, but I knew I'd need them someday, because something inside told me the worst was still coming. And I was right. A few mornings later, Lila was waiting for her school van. I was inside, grabbing her lunchbox, when I heard her scream. By the time I ran outside, Karen was standing there, angry, shouting about rule violations. Then, with one swift, hateful motion, she kicked over the ramp. Lila fell. The wheelchair twisted sideways. Metal hit concrete. For a moment, the world stopped moving. Neighbors peeked through curtains. No one came out. Just me, kneeling beside my crying daughter while Karen muttered something about teaching responsibility. That's when I knew this wasn't just an HOA issue. This was abuse. And she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The day it happened is burned into my memory like a scar I can't heal. The morning sunlight spilled across the driveway as I packed Lila's backpack. She was excited. Her art project had been selected for display at school. "Dad," she said, grinning, "maybe Mrs. Harris will let me paint something for the class wall." Her voice was full of hope, the kind of hope only a child can still hold onto, even after the world has been cruel. I stepped inside for just a moment to grab her lunchbox. Then I heard it, a scream so sharp it cut through the air. "Dad!" When I rushed outside, the scene in front of me didn't seem real. Karen was standing there, face twisted with anger, shouting about violating neighborhood rules. My daughter's ramp lay twisted on the ground, the screws scattered like broken promises. Lila's wheelchair was on its side, her small body trembling, one hand scraped and bleeding. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My mind just went blank. Then I saw Karen kick at the ramp again, like she wanted to erase it from the earth. "Try walking like normal people," she hissed. Something inside me snapped. I ran forward, shielding my daughter with my body. "You touch that ramp again, and I swear—" "Oh, please," she interrupted, rolling her eyes. "You people always play the victim. Maybe she just needs discipline." The sound of Lila's sobbing drowned out everything else. I lifted her gently back into her chair. Her lip quivered as she whispered, "Dad, why do they hate me?" I didn't have an answer. Neighbors watched from windows, phones in their hands, but not one came outside. The same people who once smiled at us were now silent witnesses to cruelty. I looked around, realizing how alone we were, but also how wrong this was. My hands shook as I picked up my phone. I took photos of the scene, the broken ramp, the bruises, Karen's smirking face. She didn't even try to hide what she'd done. In fact, she laughed. "You'll hear from the HOA soon," she said, turning to walk away. "This neighborhood doesn't need people like you." That's when I knew this wasn't the end. This was the moment everything changed. Because Karen thought she'd broken my daughter's spirit. But what she really broke was my silence. And once I decided to fight back, legally, publicly, completely, there would be no turning back. That night, the house was silent. Lila was asleep, her arm bandaged, her wheelchair parked beside her bed like a wounded soldier. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the broken ramp pieces I had dragged in from outside. Every dent, every scratch, felt like a wound carved into my own heart. For hours, I replayed the moment in my head, Karen's smirk, her words, my daughter's tears. I'd spent years believing that kindness and patience could change people. But that day proved me wrong. Sometimes, evil doesn't back down until it's confronted with something stronger, justice. I opened my laptop and pulled up my files. Case laws, ADA regulations, federal disability rights codes. For years, I'd worked quietly as an ADA compliance consultant, helping businesses ensure accessibility. I never thought I'd need to use that knowledge to defend my own family. But now it was personal. I gathered everything, the photos, the HOA letters, the videos, even the audio from my security camera that caught her shouting those hateful words. Each file became a piece of ammunition in the war she started. By sunrise, my decision was made. No more silence. No more waiting for apologies that would never come. Karen thought she'd humiliated us, but she didn't know who she was dealing with. Because I wasn't just a father, I was a man who understood the law better than she could ever imagine. I looked at Lila sleeping peacefully, her little hand resting on her stuffed unicorn, and whispered, "It's my turn now, sweetheart." She's about to learn what justice really looks like. If you've ever had someone try to take your peace, your dignity, your family's hope, you'll understand what I felt that night. And trust me, what came next she never saw coming. The following week, I showed up at the HOA office with a calmness that almost scared me. I wasn't angry anymore, I was focused. I carried a folder thick with documents, timestamps, photos, and legal citations that could bury anyone foolish enough to cross the line. The receptionist gave me a polite smile that faded the second she saw my face. "Is Mrs. Karen available?" I asked evenly. "Tell her it's about the ramp incident." When Karen finally appeared, her smugness returned instantly. "Oh, it's you," she said, crossing her arms. "Here to apologize for breaking HOA rules?" I set the folder down on the table and slid it toward her. "Actually, no. I'm here to make sure you understand what happens when someone violates the Americans with Disabilities Act and assaults a child." Her smile faltered. "Assault? Oh, please, don't exaggerate." "Then explain this," I said, playing a video from my security camera. The moment she kicked the ramp, the sound of Lila's scream, her words echoing, "Try walking like normal people," the color drained from her face. "I've already filed a report with the police," I continued. "The Department of Justice's ADA division will be contacting both you and this HOA. What you did wasn't just cruel, it was a federal offense." The room went silent. The HOA president shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "Now, let's not escalate. I interrupted. "My daughter could have been seriously injured because of your negligence, and your board ignored our complaints for months. This isn't escalation. This is accountability." Karen stammered, trying to recover. "You can't prove I already did." The next few days were a blur of legal calls, interviews, and paperwork. News spread fast. Neighbors who once avoided us were now whispering about Karen, not about us. The HOA scrambled to cooperate, terrified of fines and bad publicity. A week later, we stood in front of a federal mediator. Karen looked smaller now, no arrogance left, just fear. I presented the evidence calmly, explaining each violation of accessibility law, each harassment letter, each verbal attack. When I finished, the mediator looked at her and said, "Mrs. Harper, your actions constitute discrimination and physical endangerment under federal ADA law. You could face serious penalties." For the first time, she couldn't speak. Lila sat beside me, holding my hand. Her eyes were wide, not in fear but in pride. For once, she wasn't the victim. She was the reason something good was finally happening. In the final ruling, the HOA was fined heavily and ordered to rebuild fully accessible ramps throughout the neighborhood, not just for us, but for anyone who needed them. Karen was forced to issue a public apology and attend mandatory sensitivity and disability awareness training. When we got home, the neighborhood looked different. Neighbors came over to apologize. One of them, an older man, said softly, You made us all see how wrong we were. That evening, Lila rolled down her new ramp, strong, smooth, shining under the porch light. She turned to me and said, "Dad, we did it." I smiled through tears. "No, sweetheart, you did it. You showed them what courage really looks like." Karen never looked our way again. Her perfect little world of control had finally cracked, under the weight of her own cruelty. Sometimes, justice doesn't come with shouting or fists. Sometimes, it arrives quietly in the form of truth, evidence, and an unbreakable will to protect what matters most. Because when you fight for what's right, you don't just win a case. You change a community. The air felt lighter after that day. For the first time in months, I saw my daughter's smile reach her eyes again. The fear that used to linger in her voice was gone, replaced with quiet confidence. Every time she rolled down the new ramp, she'd look back at me with a proud grin, like she knew she'd earned her victory. The neighborhood began to change too. The same people who once crossed the street to avoid us now waved and stopped to talk. Some even helped repaint our fence or offered to install more safety features for Lila. It wasn't just about repairing ramps anymore, it was about rebuilding humanity. One morning, as Lila practiced painting on the porch, a young boy from next door came over. "Can I help?" he asked shyly. She smiled and handed him a brush. Watching them laugh together felt like witnessing the start of something bigger, the moment when compassion finally replaced cruelty. That night, as the sun dipped low, I stood by the ramp and traced my fingers along the new steel frame. It wasn't just metal and bolts anymore. It was a reminder of strength, resilience, and love. I thought about Karen, about how easily people can lose their way when they let pride and hate guide them. And I thought about how one small act of courage, one father's refusal to stay silent, can create ripples that change an entire community. I knelt beside Lila and whispered, "You know, sweetheart, heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just roll forward, no matter how many times the world tries to push them back." She smiled softly. "Then I guess we're both heroes, Dad." And in that moment, I knew she was right. If you've made it this far, thank you. You didn't just watch a story, you felt it. Because this isn't only about a father, a daughter, or an HOA. It's about what happens when we stop letting cruelty win. Tell me honestly, if you were in my place watching someone mock your disabled child and kick away her dignity, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet, or would you have stood up and fought back? Drop your answer in the comments below, because I want to hear from real people from real hearts. And tell me something else. Where are you watching this from? What city, what state, what part of this world? Because together, we're building something powerful here. A community that doesn't look away from injustice, but stands tall against it. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll away. Take a second, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who believes in doing what's right. Let's make kindness louder than hate. I don't care if you're watching from New York, Texas, or a small town no one's ever heard of. What I care about is this: that you believe deep down that no child deserves to be treated like less. Every share, every comment, every like, it tells the world that compassion still matters. So, if this story moved you, share it. Tell others, and let's build a community where love, courage, and justice walk or roll side by side. I'm just a father who refused to stay silent. But with you, we can be something so much bigger. Comment below where you're watching from. Subscribe if you believe in standing up for what's right. And remember, kindness is not weakness. It's the greatest power we have.